Hello again. It's been a little bit. I have been working on that video that I talked about way back in, but it turned into a bigger project than I expected. It's pretty cool. So I'm not going to talk about it right now. Stick around to the end. There's something else that I wanted to talk about first, and I wanted to talk about it so much that it can't wait until the other one is done. Here's a funny thing about me. I am like other girls, in that I love Hamilton. I love to compare and contrast the historical narrative as far as we know it with the adaptations that were made for the musical, again, like other girls. And there's been a really interesting and vigorous conversation among fans over the last 5 years or so about the play's treatment of race, and the interesting contrast between the casting of people of color in lead roles versus the rather slight engagement with the reality of slavery. On the one hand, not every story can be about everything. On the other hand, that's a big thing. And any decision to minimize slavery should be scrutinized. Not necessarily condemned, but scrutinized. For that matter, I'm pretty sure there isn't a single mention of Indigenous Americans in the entire show. I would wager a lot of Jeopardy money on that. I'm not going to take the time to sing the entire soundtrack right now to be sure, but I want you to know I could. You know what? Call to action for myself. I should do some research and see what Indigenous writers have said about the musical and that omission. I bet it would be really enlightening. Because here's the thing. I can read about the legacy of things like colonization or slavery, and in fact I'd go so far as to say that it's my duty to do so, but I will never be the kind of expert that can bring lived experience to the conversation, not even indirectly, not even through generational effects like an African American might be able to do. The fact is that in 1776 my ancestors were already here and had been here for over a century. You know the first Thanksgiving, the one that wasn't really the first and has all that mythology around it? Setting the mythology aside, there really was a big meal, and my great-something grandmother cooked it. So that's how deep this thing goes. As far as I know, the lands that were occupied by my various ancestors were northern states, so it would be very easy for me to say, hey, not only do I not personally participate in slavery, even my ancestors were clean. However, unpaid labor on that scale created a lot of wealth. That wealth got around, and that's the economy my family lived in. Not only did they have resources that were denied to enslaved people, they also had easy access to the literal fruits of the labor that the enslaved people did. They could go down to the general store and buy rice and sugar and tobacco and cinnamon and even that fancy cotton cloth that's becoming so popular, and they didn't have to think about where it came from. If a white artisan in the South had slaves tending to the household chores, that artisan had more time to practice their craft and make a good product which my ancestors could enjoy for a low price. It wasn't their fault that the price was low, but it was to their benefit, and it was to the enslaved people's detriment. My ancestors didn't cause the slavery to happen. They may even have vigorously opposed it, for all I know, but it did make their lives more comfortable, and for the most part, they enjoyed the privilege of having a clear conscience, because they were completely alienated from the process by which those products got to them. They did not have to bear witness. I love Hamilton. There are no perfect works of art, and this one is so good that it's uncommon for its flaws to be deal breakers for people who criticize it. It's valid, but it's uncommon. However, there was one thing that made me really uncomfortable in the movie that just came out last month. Sally Hemings. She's so cute. Why is she so cute? Why does she do a sexy happy dance and smile flirtatiously at Jefferson? Like, I say why, but I know why. It's because Jefferson is a rock star and he's coming home and they've got a tone to set and it's a comedy song. But at the same time, Sally be a lamb? Lamb is right. She's 16. He's 46 and he's already knocked her up once. He's gonna do it 6 more times. And the children who survive are going to have to work in his house until they're 21. And there's a controversy here. He did free them, only them, out of the hundreds he had, but still, they lived in his house. They had violin lessons. Ooh, real hard slave life. Besides, how do you know Sally Hemings wasn't into it? Which, no. I'm assuming most of my viewers are not saying these things out here, but if you are, Google it. I'm not going to be your primary source on why that stuff is wrong. Here's the thing about Thomas Jefferson. His enslaved children were 1/8 African. They were 7/8 white. If their lives were easier than most, that's an indictment of their father, not an endorsement. It is just as bad to exploit and disenfranchise a person with kinky black hair as a person with straight black hair. If you let the second group live indoors, but you still won't let them vote, all you're revealing is that race is something we made up because it was financially convenient. The adult Hemings children were so fair-skinned that most of them disappeared into white society without a ripple. Sally Hemings herself was 3/4 white, and she was very fully a slave. That 1/4 was enough to condemn her to a life of having 7 babies, starting as a teenager, for a man 30 years her senior, to whom she was not allowed to say no. Whether or not she liked him might have made a difference for her. It doesn't make a difference for us. Or for him. And before the movie came out, I used to listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, as you may have guessed, a lot. And I would imagine Hemings' presence in this one scene as kind of an ironic counterpoint to the party atmosphere I was talking about. Like, it didn't have to be heavy-handed. Jefferson is an antagonist in this play. In his second song, he gets massively dunked on for being a slaveholder, and it's great. And it made total sense to me that his introduction would include a nod to this part of his life, a little glimpse of dishonor in the flashy show he's putting on. In the very next stanza after he addresses Sally Hemings by name, he says, "I can't believe that we are free." We! Thomas, no! Slavery ended in France while she was there with you. Coming back to America specifically means she will never have freedom again, because you have control of her life. Because the alternative was to stay behind and be 16 and pregnant in a foreign land without her mom. So I hear these lines, and I'm like, ooh, this is biting satire. It's subtle, but oof, well done. And then I see the musical, and I'm like, oh, they decided to make her very grown up, and smiley, and wiggly. And hey, when I had my first baby, I couldn't do a beautiful high kick over my head, but I guess I was older. Like a little. Listen, that dancer is named Ariana DeBose, and she's a genius. And I am coming perilously close to opening my Karen hole and telling a mixed-race woman that she looks too happy for my tastes and she should act miserable, please. It would be better for the kids. So let me be clear. Black women should do whatever they want. This may shock you, but I have not actually met Sally Hemings. It's not impossible that she had exactly that kind of an affect. Maybe she liked her life. Maybe she liked him. Maybe she acted like she liked her life, because doing so would cause her life to become more likable to her. I can easily imagine that that sort of companionship would be more interesting to an old white male politician. It seems pretty plausible now that I put this all into words. So let me just say this. The choreographer of the show is not a black woman or an actress, it's a white man. A month after Hamilton premiered, he turned 46, which is exactly the same age that Jefferson was in the scene I've been talking about. And please don't take this as a call-out, because I really don't know how I feel about that choreography choice. He took home a Tony, and, I mean, have you seen the show? You should probably see it, it's good! It's kind of like looking for a fire exit at a museum. As far as I can tell, there's no fire here, there's no reason to bail on Hamilton, but I still feel like cultivating that habit of scrutinizing, and maybe deciding not to condemn, is a safety training, and it can help us make suggestions in future, write our own stories more effectively. It can help us identify when something is not worth putting up with in what we consume. I talked earlier about my own ancestors and the economy they lived in. I think there's a real temptation to take too much satisfaction from castigating the Founding Fathers for things like slavery and colonialism. And the danger that worries me is not that we'll fail to give credit where it's due, or that we'll knock over any particular statue. The danger is that we'll feel so good about ourselves for being so mad about what happened 350 years ago that we'll pat ourselves on the back and eat that extra cookie and go to bed with our eyes closed just a little bit more tightly than they are when they're, open. The fact is, we're still benefiting from the exploitation of Black people in 2020. We're still kept complicit by alienation from the people who labor for our goods. Go read the 13th Amendment if you haven't. The one that legalizes slavery. Legalizes it. Defines the conditions under which it is permitted. Read about the war on drugs and why it happened, not according to cranks, but according to the spoken and written words of the people who conducted it. Find out who they were trying to arrest and how they chose their targets. Look up for-profit prisons and how fast they're growing. Look up how they make their profits. Look up who gets to keep their profits. There are other kinds of exploitation. There are other people who suffer. There are people in this demographic who do not particularly suffer. Not every story can be about everything. This story is about Black slavery and how it benefits me personally. My household is in the income bracket where we can't afford the name brand stuff, but we can afford the generic. We're like 2 big disasters away from financial ruin and not just one. We have big, wonderful families that would catch us if we fell. I mention this to say that I live comfortably because I am able to buy things inexpensively. Why am I able to do that? I'll give you a hint. It's not because the owners of these companies are drawing the same pay as their workers. Were your shoes made in China? Better make sure it wasn't a Uyghur camp. Was your shirt made in the USA? Better make sure it wasn't prison labor. Do you want to eat a candy bar? This one costs $1, and the cocoa beans were picked by a malnourished child, and the dollar goes to a white billionaire. This one costs $6. It's very small, and the cocoa beans were picked by a well-paid adult who owns his own farm. This one costs 50 cents and contains no cocoa beans at all, and it tastes bad. Did you guys watch The Good Place? I'm not going to go into it now, it would have to be a whole video, because I'm glad they brought it up, but woof. And okay, maybe I have the free time to take a couple of hours every month and do all the research I need to select ethical brands for every single thing. Maybe I have enough willpower to have one nice ethical chocolate bar every 6 weeks rather than every week. Maybe I can learn to sew. Maybe I can grow a dang vegetable in a dang window pot. Maybe all of these things are true all of the time. Maybe some of them are true some of the time. It would be inappropriate for me to specify, because my point is, it should not be this hard to live a normal, peaceful life without paying money that expresses support for slavery. You know that saying, vote with your dollars? There are not enough choices on this ballot. And if you'll allow me some unproductive feelings for a second, I resent being made so powerless. Even if I lived my life absolutely flawlessly under this system, which, I would love to do, but cannot, what would it actually change? Would the parents of that cocoa field child suddenly have good enough jobs to support their family? Does that kid skip off to t-ball practice? No, absolutely nothing would change except my feelings about myself. Maybe it would still be worth it to do so, but it wouldn't save the world. There's a famous short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin, who is wonderful. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil it because it's from 1973 and I don't like it. In the story, there's a utopian city where everything is happy and wonderful and everybody is healthy and beautiful, and by some magic, the thing that empowers them to live this way is that one little child is suffering in the dark somewhere underneath the city. Forever. Everyone knows about the child, most of them have seen it, but the consensus is that the joy of everyone else outweighs the misery of this one person. And knowing about the child just makes them, gosh, so grateful, and it makes them so kind and gentle to each other. But sometimes people are haunted by the knowledge, and it drives them to leave the city and walk off into the unknown. The implication is whatever is out there is worth it to the ones who walk away. They won't be complicit anymore. And the reason I kind of hate this story is that the wrong part of it is fictional. I mean, we don't have a utopia here. The suffering is a lot more spread out, and the wealth is a lot more concentrated, but the wealth absolutely does come from the suffering, just as surely as if it was magic. But the city is the planet, and none of us can leave. You can't opt out of the economy. The woods and the mountains are owned. The only way to change the system is to change the system. When I said that changing my own habits wouldn't do any good in the world, a deeply ingrained part of my brain cried out in outrage. How dare you! One person can make a difference! Don't give up! Haven't you ever seen a movie? Didn't you just watch Hamilton? Now that is the story of a singular genius, written, may I remind you, by another singular genius in our own time. But that's a trap. Neither Hamilton, nor Jefferson, nor Washington, nor Lin-Manuel Miranda, nor you, nor I ever did anything alone, however much we want to think we did. Hamilton's power was specifically in convincing other people to take action. Jefferson and Washington led armies. Miranda had his whole cast, and musicians, and sound techs, and spotlight operators, and choreographers, and ushers, and and. Collective action is the only thing that gets systemic changes accomplished. What I do matters if other people do it with me. Thomas Jefferson wanted to abolish slavery, and he tried several times to put that into law. I don't know about you, but in my history classes, that was treated like a curiosity, like, Isn't that strange? What an odd, weird paradox that I can't relate to at all. He advocated against it, yet he himself enslaved people. And it was left hanging. And some people left the class going, well, I guess that makes him a dang hypocrite who I shouldn't respect. And other people left going, aw, he dreamed of a better world, but he wanted to be careful and not waste lives. That's great. I just think we should think about that paradox more and talk about it more. Because Jefferson certainly could have freed all his workers, and it would have financially ruined him. Both of those things. He didn't actually have to end slavery to free them. He had more power than that. Maybe he figured being rich would help him stay in office, and being in office would help him abolish all of it. Some sources say he treated them well. Of course, we have a lot more of his side of the story, and not very much of theirs. So let me be clear. I'm not writing of Jefferson apologia here. He's dead, and the world is what it is. What I am saying is, it is very easy for me to sit here and dispose of dead rich white men's ill-gotten privileges. It's a lot harder to dispose of my own. If watching an actress play a slave acting happy makes me feel weird, I have a choice. I can get rid of the feeling by writing a big screed about how slavery is bad, actually, and I would never... Or I can grab hold of that weird feeling and let it take me somewhere. Maybe it would take me to my bank account, or my representative's mailbox, or their office, or the local police station or prison, or the websites of people who are already fighting for change and just need me to volunteer. Maybe it would take me to the streets of my city. Thank you for watching me talk about Hamilton. So that other video I promised was supposed to have come out in June, and it's now August. I was planning to write a video essay, and I accidentally wrote a music video, which I have even less of an idea of how to make. But I'm doing it, and it's almost done. So, keep an eye out for that. If it continues to kick my butt, maybe I'll just keep making other stuff like this in the meantime. But, happy to be back. I made myself a little junky teleprompter. I almost said teleporter. I've been inside too long. We're still kept complacent and complicit. Ooh, that was a Trump move right there. I misread it. And then I just pretended I didn't. The